brief slide about myself and what I do. So my name is Layla Levy, and I have a boutique travel concierge and full service agency. My mission in life is to help educate and inspire and then actually assist and enable people to travel. So what I do is I build personalized and customized trips for people. And sometimes people may not be looking for a very personalized trip for themselves, and they wanted to travel on a cruise, a tour, or something like that. And I'm happy that I have all those resources in my backyard that I will help with planning all of that piece together, or recommending the best tour for you, or anything that comes as part of any of your travel and experiences. What I believe is we are all born explorers and we are adventurous. And I just wanted to help people to experience the beautiful world that we live in. If you're not following my Instagram, I highly, highly recommend that you start following at Travel Design by Layla. My staff and I, we provide a lot of educational material when it comes to travel. So it's not actually promoting or sharing a lot of deals. What we do is share different content when it comes to travel. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and that's kind of like that's a little bit about me. And as you all know, travel industry is hit significantly, and one of the things that I came across and I thought, well, maybe this is a great idea, is to run virtual travel series, because right now we can't physically travel, and now maybe is the best time that we could sit in our home and we bring travel to you. So when hopefully the time is right, then we can actually travel. So that's enough about me. Last week, for those of you who didn't know, last week we talked about Peru. So we had almost a similar session like this about Peru. We'll share all of those details, because I actually have some recording, which, by the way, I totally forgot to do my recording this time. Oh, okay. I realized that I had done the recording. All right. So without any further ado, I wanted to introduce you to Linda Kana. And Linda and I are talking about Morocco together. So Linda, would be great if you can share a little bit about yourself with the people here.
So thank you very much, Layla. And first of all, I want to say what a pleasure it is working with Layla and Travel Design. I am only 21 years old, US, but I have been in this business for 40 years. The business of providing unique experiences, escorting luxury tours around the world, and also in putting together all types of trips, with the focus being on adventure, sustainability, purpose-driven travel, and the world's most unique places, making them accessible for everybody. I've always believed in do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And my other slogan that I live by every day is by a very famous poet and strong, independent woman, Maya Angelou, which she says, and I quote, people will often forget what you say to them. They will even forget what you do for them, but they will never ever forget how you make them feel. And with a partnership between Tour Ken Vacations, which is our parent company, and Travel Design and Lit by Layla, we feel that we are delivering this concierge touch, this professionalism, and this unique, personalized caring that will set us apart. So thank you for letting us speak with you today remotely. And this too shall pass. And soon we'll be traveling together. Flip.
Sure, we will. All right. So first of all, why do you need to travel to Morocco for? I want to just get a quick maybe put that in the chat box. How many of you actually have Morocco in your bucket list? I'm hoping that you do have that in your bucket list, and that's why that you're here and you decided that you wanted to spend your evening with us. But few things, because we have a lot of content that we wanted to share. So I'll just talk to you about why Morocco should be on your bucket list. It's very accessible from North America. And Morocco is one of those countries that it has beautiful imperial cities with lots of history and character. And not only that, there are beautiful beaches. Stretching the coastline in Morocco, and we are going to talk about some of that. And it's not only about history and culture, but it has an experience of Sahara deserts, and to actually spend maybe a night or two in a camp in the middle of the desert. And maybe you want to go on a camel ride, which is we have all of that material covered, and all of this beautiful culture of which is a mixture of now multicultural influences from Arabs, from Berbers, French, and others. So it's all coming together in this beautiful country that we're going to talk a little bit more with you tonight. This is briefly a map of Morocco. So typically a lot of people, that depends on how much time you've actually got, but typically that's a good 10-day trip that a lot of people do. So they go to, okay, so they're going to Casablanca, Meknes, Fes, Erfurt, Marguza, and then all the way to Marrakesh and back to Casablanca. Casablanca. It seems like I lost my.
It seems that someone became a presenter and the
Yeah.
screen went.
So let me do that again. And I forgot to mention, we've allocated about 10-15 minutes after the talk, so you can have all of your questions answered that time. So this is typically a good 10-day itinerary if you wanted to explore Morocco. Obviously, not enough. And we're going to talk about some of those best experiences and must-dos that you have to do as part of this trip, as well as if you wanted to extend your trip and you have more time, there are some other recommendation that we wanted to make. The other thing that we typically cover in our travel talk is some of those gems that not too many people know about, or some of those off the beaten path experiences that you can't find in any of the travel books that you may read, because of the experiences that Linda and I had in exploring the world and putting all those groups or even individuals together, and have to deal with that several times. Next, well, basically, after you arrive to Casablanca, which is our, Linda, I'm going to get you to speak to this one, which is arrival to Casablanca.
Well, thank you very much, Layla. And first of all, let's just talk a little bit about the flights. You're coming from all over Canada. There is a direct nonstop flight from Montreal to Casablanca, which is just over 7 hours. It's a very, very good flight and makes good connections with people coming from BC, Alberta, even Saskatchewan. When you arrive into Casablanca, you are actually on the sea. And we'll talk later about climate and everything else in Morocco. It's a bright, sunny time. It's very important to go in the low to off-peak seasons. You certainly don't want to be in Morocco in the heat of the summer when it's 55 plus. Celsius. It's really deadly. So I highly recommend going in a time like October or November. What you're seeing a picture of here is Hassan II Mosque. This is the third largest mosque in the world, preceded only by two in Saudi Arabia. And it's really something to see for tourists, the way it's been built, the way the architecture, the inside, the opening doors, like the Sky Dome in Toronto, the ceilings extract and open. And that's definitely something worth seeing, strategically located right on the ocean. Flip. Sorry, we have to use me flipping.
One comment I have on Linda, can you put me on mute? Okay. So one comment I have on Casablanca, a lot of people actually think that they could do, though there are guided tours that you need to book in advance or through a tour company that needs to be done. And then the other thing is, this is, Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, the first or the second mosque that you can visit if you're a non-Muslim, because most in the majority of the cities and mosques, those are explicitly for Muslims, and they're not really open to tourists. And Hassan II Mosque is actually, they've got like few hours or so for the tourists to visit that.
Excellent point, Leila. Yes, you are correct. Also, we highly recommend, and this is again the purpose for travel design and these travel talk series. Morocco is not the type of country I would recommend people going to alone. Not that you can't. And in the early days, in the 60s, it was quite a hippie spot to go into Marrakesh. But it's the type of spot where you want to have a guide only because, first of all, you can only get limited tickets to visit the temple or the mosque, and you really need a guide.
Hi, Leila John, do you hear me?
I
Yes, but
hear
can you
you.
please go on mute?
Is much more efficient than
Oh.
artificial intelligence,
How?
but gradually the computer will be able to perform
I
relatively.
can mute
Okay.
you too.
Gloria. Okay.
Yes.
Welcome. And if you have any questions, please just type them in the question box and we will answer them at the end of this talk. So again, the history of the mosque and the sites of Casablanca and all over Morocco is really where you want to have a small group. It makes it safe, it makes it informative, and assures you're going to have the best time ever. So next slide. This is inside the temple or the mosque. I'm sorry. It's spectacular with the silver and the huge spots for worship. And you can imagine during Eid, which was canceled this year due to the coronavirus, this place would be packed. And what's most spectacular about this mosque for those historians on this talk is it has a retractable roof, which opens up when the King of Morocco comes for certain special events. Definitely somewhere beautiful. And underneath, like in all mosques, which you're able to see as a foreigner, you're able to see where they bathe when they come to prayer. They would first go wash up, wash your hands, which we've heard a million times, wash their feet, and then they will come up to pray. So it's a beautiful sight to see, and there's a lot of rich history. Next slide. I put this slide in because even though you're in Morocco, and in Casablanca, which is the nation's capital. No, I'm correct. It's not the nation's capital. Rabat is, which we'll talk about later, but Casablanca is one of the most commercial cities. It's something like Toronto and Ottawa. The seafood and the food that you're able to eat here is spectacular. And on our tours, we kind of handpicked this little seafood bistro, which you can view the Hassan II Mosque from and have a delicious meal. So you're able to eat healthy, eat good food, and enjoy a wonderful experience throughout your time. Because we all know food and wine is definitely a part of any travel experience. Next slide. I want to point out that although you're in a Muslim country, Morocco is very open. You can wear whatever clothes you want. People say, do we have to be covered up? No. Would you wear your short Lululemons that crawl up your butt? Maybe not. Only not because you're going to be arrested, but you just might not feel you're doing a service to the people there. But the only time you have to wear a scarf is when you go inside the mosque. And if you don't have one, one will be provided for you. This is Mohammed V Square in Casablanca. It's a beautiful spot to walk around and visit the Parliament buildings. And if you go at the time when our tours go, you can see there's no people. So you kind of have the whole place to yourself. Somewhere like the rest of the world is today. And I'm only kidding, but that's a beautiful spot. King's Palace is where the king lived, and they have gorgeous gardens that you can walk through and enjoy. A wonderful spot to see. Next slide. It's very important, if anyone's Jewish, there's a very strong Jewish presence throughout Morocco, especially in Marrakesh, Fez, and in Casablanca. And here's a photograph of the Temple El Bath, which is a beautiful spot to see. And again, very limited entrances to come to these temples. If you come on a guided tour through Leila, you'll make sure that you're able to see that if that's important to you, because they only sell so many tickets for a select group at certain timings. So it's a beautiful spot to see. There's also ancient Christian churches and Roman Catholic churches in Casablanca. Even though the religion isn't practiced that much, there's presences there, and it's really delightful to be. All these things you can walk to from the hotels that you're staying at in Casablanca. Casablanca, however, is a commercial capital. There's not a lot to see in Casablanca aside from the things that I pointed out to you. It's a very interesting spot. But what we do is when you arrive into Casablanca, we look at the timings that the flights arrive. So we always ask our guests to come in the day before the tour starts. And the tour actually starts the day after your breakfast, the night after you arrive. So this is when we take you to the nation's capital, which is Rabat. Rabat is such an interesting imperial city and UNESCO site. And this is the Great Square, and all these different kings, which you'll learn about their dynasties and history when you're in Morocco. Their names are all Mohammed, and they're all spelt differently. Some with M-U-H, M-O-H, some have two M's, some have one M. So you're going to learn a million different Mohammeds, and it's quite interesting. But this is the main square. This was about to be built into a gorgeous place of a Congress place before it was destroyed, and now you can visit it and see how in the day how great this would have been in the nation's capital. Next slide. In Morocco and in Rabat, one of in the same square is the Mausoleum of Mohammed V. This is definitely worth seeing. This is all made of marble. For any photographers or historians, it's gorgeous. You will get to visit this. And next slide, this houses the king himself, Mohammed V. This is his coffin, and it's guarded by two live people. You can see in the corners, one of them, and all outlaid in gold. It's really something to go inside, and you feel totally safe, and it's very few places that you can actually get inside and see these things. Next slide. From Rabat, the nation's capital, after seeing the fortress and the Mausoleum, we then take you to the imperial city of Meknes. Here you will learn about the true dictator of Meknes. I'm not going to give away all the history, but he was quite a tyrant, and his fear or his insecurities and his fear to control enabled him to build one of the world's most imperial cities and beautiful cities. And this is the Great Wall to enter into Meknes. Next slide. Meknes is famous for its stables and its granary. If you go to Morocco and you don't get to see the stables and the granary of Meknes, you are missing something. This king housed over 200 horses and horsemen for each one of the horses. They were all looked after very well. And this huge granary to feed all these horses, as well as the people. The enormity of this wonderful palace and how it's been kept intact for so long is definitely a must-see, and just kind of awes you. It's really something worth experiencing. Another site that a lot of people miss, and you would never know about this if you were not part of a guided tour, is the underground prison in Meknes. Right here, the very grounds that we walked over 600 prisoners had an entire underground city. And after the king was overthrown, these prisoners could leave, but they never did. They actually were so comfortable with the life and all the services provided to them underground. Many of them still live there for years afterwards. So it's quite interesting, and just to see how 600 people lived underground during these prehistoric, the hundreds of years ago is something wonderful. Next slide. From Meknes, we have a wonderful lunch, and then we go on to Volubilis, an ancient Roman city. I really recommend everyone visit Meknes and Volubilis, because this is where you see the great mosaics that are still intact, and the ruins, which are quite spectacular. Who would think that Morocco's got such famous Roman ruins? Next slide. And here you can see some of the probably because of the weather being so dry, and it's really fun to hike through these Roman ruins and get pictures and see the history, see the mosaics in such good shape, and you're just really in the middle of nowhere. It's a wonderful, place, and for those of you that are athletic and you like hiking, you certainly get your steps in there, and it's wonderful to have a guide with you on these small tours. That's really the way to see Morocco, and Layla will get into that later, is book a small tour, anywhere from 3 to 15 people, so that you get to experience everything in a concierge type of a way. From Volubilis, we then get into an imperial artesian, very magical city of Fez. I'm going to let Layla take over, but this is a picture of Fez from the lookout point. One of the things I didn't know, I knew of Fez, I knew where it was. I didn't know or feel the intellectualism of the people that live here, the history, the artisans, the crafts that have been passed on for hundreds of years from one family to another, and just how spectacular this city is. So from here, I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to let Layla take over.
Excellent. So Fes have beautiful souks, or what's called market. Why am I not seeing the picture of myself? So it's so beautiful to have to explore these souks and market. And souks, by the way, in Arabic means bazaar, or it means market. And they are, the way that they have it in North Africa and Middle East is very, very unique. So if you haven't traveled, you don't have a concept of how those markets would look like. Here at this slide, I wanted to talk about the famous Moroccan tagine. And a lot of people think that tagine is actually the name of a dish. And I had someone who said once to me that, oh, I looked at all the menu and they were all tagines. And so the tagine is actually the name of the vessel, and this name of this clay-made dish that they actually prepare food in it. And we have some other slide when we get into the cooking classes that I always recommend my clients to go on. And the other important thing about tagine, and if you're buying tagines from these markets, there is a steel plate that comes underneath that. So if you're not getting that steel plate, this thing will get cracked up and it's no good to use, and that's done. So make sure that you're buying this other steel plate that comes with it. Here I wanted to talk a little bit about why this Medina and the souks of Fez are so famous, because they are the world's largest living medieval Medina and a UNESCO site. they've got over 9,000 winding streets lying within 365 hectares. So it's really an interesting place to explore, and it goes back to the 9th century, it's a beautiful place to explore. A lot of people get lost in all those like winding streets, but don't be worried. It's not a matter of, so if you're exploring this on your own, it's just a matter of when you'll be lost, because you at some point you totally will get lost at this winding streets.
And if I could just interject for a second,
Sure, Linda.
what Leila is saying is very true. The souks of Fez are very convoluted and twisty, and unlike other souks in other imperial cities, I strongly recommend you have a guide there. I also wanted to point out the donkeys. All these pictures are what Leila and I have taken ourselves. The donkeys, when they come through, you know, you better clear the way, because they're so skinny. The little streets are so skinny that these donkeys just come plowing through, and they'll actually, you hear them clip-clopping, and you're like, oh my God, you really have to experience that. I've never seen such narrow streets. And for anybody who is a fan of those great historical doors, Fez is certainly, all over Morocco is certainly the spot where you're going to be getting all of your photos. So
Cool. In this slide, I wanted to talk about the significance of mint tea. And mint tea is probably the most famous drink that people drink in Morocco. And in terms of even how important that is, it's sort of like they take it as a ceremony of tea service. And the way that they actually pour this tea, it's super important. Even in some of their traditions, when the bride and groom were going to meet, and the bride was going to come in with a tray of tea. It was so important how this mint tea was prepared, and everything within that was perfect. And it was one of the things that people take it super seriously in Morocco. And a lot of places that you go, they would offer you the mint tea, and they drink mint tea probably like the way that we're drinking coffee here, or maybe even more rigorously. And it's probably, I would say, one of the most delicious thing and teas that I've ever experienced is the mint tea in Morocco. Linda, do you want to add anything?
just wanted to add, I had no idea the importance of the mint tea ceremony in Morocco. For example, women, when they're young girls, when they're getting engaged and they're meeting their future in-laws, how they prepare the tea, right from how they heat the pot, how they pour water in, put the mint tea, get rid of it because some of the bitterness, reapply the water. The whole ceremony itself is quite a ritual. So it's definitely something unique, and to see that demonstrated, which we'll show you later in the cooking class, it's part of the culture. Thank you. Okay, I wanted to mention in Fez something I didn't know, and I've been taking tours to Morocco for years. But did you girls, or all of you on this call, did you know the first university and the oldest university in the world is actually in Morocco? And it is now a mosque. So like Leila mentioned earlier, there are only 2 mosques that foreigners are able to visit, and Hassan II is one of them. You cannot visit this mosque, but you can see it from the outside. And to know that the first university in the world is from Fez, this is why the people of Fez have a bit of an attitude. They tend to think they're from Fez. It's like being from France and you're from Paris. It's like they tend to think they're the intellectuals, they're the artists, they're the so you really notice the people. They're wonderful people. So that is in Fez. And of course the Royal Palace. This palace is spectacular with the gold leaf doors. You cannot go through the doors, but it's an excellent photo op to have your pictures taken by one of the 7 gold leaf doors, a beautiful imperial site in Fez. One of the most, and I don't know if any of you people have seen this photograph. It's a this is one of the photos I took, but it's very photographed. This is the famous tanneries of Morocco. Morocco probably has, amongst other parts of the world, the softest, finest leather in the world. And why? Because of the way they tan it, the tanneries. And when we take our groups to the tannery, what's unique that you're not able to sense in this virtual travel talk is this smell. What makes the leather so soft is the guano that it's soaked in for weeks on end. The guano consists of pigeon poop and vinegar. So, we give our guests a nice mint sprig when they climb the stairs to look at this tannery. And from there, you're able to buy some of the finest leather. If you have any leather that has a scent, that if you buy it from the street, that means it's not properly curated. So you'll get a little course in understanding how leather is made and what fine leather is from, different grades of leather, something very unique. Next slide. And because it's a city of artisans, we love to show our guests. This is something Layla and I pride a lot. We like to have our guests interact with all these unique experiences. So we take our guests to one of the pottery shops where we have the pros show us how it's done, and then you're able to actually try your hand at making pottery. And it's really something, because for those of you that have never done it, it's amazing how you can make something guided by these experts, so it's a lot of fun. Next slide. Okay, so Layla, I'm going to let you take it over.
Sure. So far, if you followed our journey, we came from Casablanca to Rabat to Meknes to Fez, and one of my favorite places, and I always recommend, at least as a day trip, that you take on, is the Chef Chouan. And some of you may have seen the pictures from Chef Chouan, but this is this is what you will see in this beautiful blue city. And it looks like the city has been hit with a downpour of blue paint. And these are real pictures that some of them Linda took. Some it's from my trip, so I took it. And right now, yes, the city has been fairly touristy, but I would say that it's at least I would say one of my favorite places in Morocco, and to see all these colorful, beautiful colors coming together. In the next slide, I wanted to take you a little bit around. So, what the other thing that I typically recommend, if people wanted to stay, they could stay in Riyadh format accommodation, which is something that you could see on the left hand upper side corner. And it's about like an indoor place. There is a courtyard in the middle, or some even restaurants are like that. And you see a lot of that in Morocco. And there are some markets around that you could explore. But the other thing that I typically recommend to my clients is to go on a short hike around the city to have a beautiful view of Chef Chouan from the upper from a hill. And through that, you'll see this beautiful small city of white and blue, and you could even, like, if you can get there earlier in the morning and while the sunrise is happening, the sceneries would be fantastic. It's sometimes we don't recommend actually you stay over because of how touristy it had become, but at least I do recommend a definitely a one day or a day trip out off of Fez. One thing I was going to mention, and the reason that we recommend a day trip, because through this, and if you pay attention, so when you are going to Chefchaouen, it's north part of the Fez. So if you're planning to come down again and go to the Sahara area, you have a longer drive. And that's why that we recommend that you go on a day trip, maybe come back and stay over in Fez, and then continue your trip. Linda, back to you.
Excellent, Layla. Other thing I want to mention about Cheshvan or Blue Town is many people ask me when I'm taking groups there, why is it blue? Some of the reasons are to repel mosquitoes, because you see a lot of blue villages, not quite like Cheshvan, but similar all over Morocco. And another reason is because of the Jewish influence. But to see Cheshvan, if you can extend your time and go there, I highly, highly recommend it, because it really is magical. It's just remote, and you're going to have to be prepared for a long car or bus drive, but worthwhile. Once you come back to Fez, and you then want to head out to the Sahara Desert, which is like nowhere else in the world, the famous Sahara Desert. But a lot of people don't realize is as you're driving from Fez to Margotsa, which is one of the most famous parts where the red sand dunes are, you go through the Mid-Atlas Mountains and a town called Efrain. Now, Efrain is like being in Switzerland. I could not believe it. When I first took my first group to Morocco years ago, I saw polo ponies. I saw people in their boats swimming, the way you'd see in Muskoka. It was like being in Switzerland. And this lion, which is known as a selfie lion, is the trademark of Efrain, where you take selfies in the green. And the temperature drops drastically, because you're going to be really hot in Fez, and then as you start climbing, and these are not the high Atlas Mountains, which we'll get into later, these are the Mid-Atlas Mountains. And Efrain is where we would recommend you stop, you have a coffee, you feel the temperature change, you just take it all in. What a wonderful, wonderful town. Next slide. And then, again, I mentioned the spectacular Mid-Atlas Mountains. When I first went to Morocco, and I've been to Morocco many times, but nobody ever told me about the spectacular mountains and the contrast of the colors, especially if you travel in November. November is a very good time to travel because, number one, it's low season, so prices are cheaper. Number two, it's cool in the afternoons and mornings, great for hiking. And number three, there's no tourists. And number four, the colors for photography are spectacular. So those are the Mid-Atlas Mountains, and you'll be seeing scenery like this. So the scenery on the drive is just spectacular. The color of the water, the color of the clouds, unbelievable. And this is, again, where you want to make sure that if you are traveling to Morocco, you are going with a small group, or you are very cautious, because the roads that we'll be going through are twisty and windy and hairpin turns, and you want to make sure you're with a reputable driver who knows what they're doing. But there's the one tunnel that you're going through, just unbelievable. Now, Leila, did you want to, we'll talk about the desert, but before we talk about the desert, what happens is the bus will take you, if you're driving, you will go from Fez to Afroud. Afroud is a fossil city, very unique, where you can buy all types of, because it's so dry, fossils can be found in the rocks of Afroud. They're over 30 million years old. And you can actually shop for these different types of fossil tabletops and earrings and ashtrays and everything else. But Afroud is very important because this is where you would board your SUVs to get into the Sahara Margotsa desert camps. And, oh, excuse me.
That's you.
Yeah, don't worry. I just sneezed. And I'm going to let Leila take over now, because this is probably one of the magical moments of your Morocco experience, amongst others. So Leila, take.
So for me personally, the first unique experience in Morocco is the Chefchaouen, and the second would be staying in a glamping camp in the desert. And Merzouga is an area that you can stay over. They've got luxury camps set up, and people are there. And I also wanted to talk about the camel ride experience, which for me, it's definitely it's probably maybe once in a lifetime experience. I have to admit, I've done it several times. And it's very, very interesting. I've done it in Jordan and Morocco, and they all are very different. And these people would take you on these camel rides, and it's surprisingly how tall these camels are and how insecure you feel when you're on top of these camels. And I was just like thinking in my head that, oh my God, if I fall down, what's going to happen? Um, and here is a picture of me and my husband, who's my travel buddy all the time. And these are some of the pictures of those experiences in the desert. So the bottom corner one shows the picture of it's not actually easy to hike up the sand dunes, and you take one step up and you come two steps down. So it's really actually a good way to burn calories. And this is the picture from the left corner, is the one that Linda took with the group that she took a little while ago. And they serve you beautiful, amazing, delicious food at these camps. And I've got some pictures of the inside. And the other experience that I have had in those camps that I stayed at is they serve you alcohol, which actually Linda put one of her pictures down there. And the other thing for me was playing real music by musicians there and actually dance to the music. So it was a very, very unique experience personally for me. And so these are some of the pictures of how those tents look like from the inside and from the outside. So they make it very comfortable, that I call it more as a glamping experience rather than a tent or camping experience. And I recently had this picture because I sent one of my clients for a honeymoon. So they can go even like all above and beyond to create that romantic experience. So if you're looking for that experience in the desert, they can create that. Linda, I wanted to to get your thoughts around, because you wanted to also talk about this whole desert and how significant this whole experience is.
Well, thank you, Leila. And I think, again, when you take that camel safari, even though you might only be on the camels for an hour to an hour and a half, you are actually taking a piece of the great caravans that used to go from Marrakesh or from Fez right down into Timbuktu. And yes, Timbuktu is a real city. It's quite an important city in the country of Mali. And you feel just for that hour and a half, like Leila said, that insecurity on that camel. And you see that the camels, even though we keep you very safe and very protected, and you have each person has their own camel boy with them, you just feel like something you never feel before. And when we talk about glamping, these tents that you stay at, they are equipped with orthopedic beds, Wi-Fi, which doesn't work that well, but it's still there, electrical sockets to charge your phones, heating, air conditioning, and award-winning food. So, to have all this luxury in the middle of the desert as the sun just lays its number on you with the sunsets and the sunrises, it humbles you, and it makes you just so grateful for every moment. That's just what I wanted to mention. And Tingier and the Tadra Gorges, this is something that I wanted to talk about. As you drive through these gorges, you would actually think for those of you that have been to Monument City or any of the state parks in Utah, southern Utah, Morocco has these amazing gorges that you can drive through, and I actually recommend everybody stop and actually hike through these gorges and see the great rock formations, natural rock formations, and feel the canyons just singing to you. And as you drive through the Tangier and the Tadra gorges, your goal destination is going to be Quasar. You're going to be seeing some of these kasbahs, which you're seeing in the distance there, and some of the older homes that have a legacy to them, but because they're all made out of mud, the Moroccans have decided to adapt to a more modern lifestyle, and they leave them abandoned. So you can see these thousands of older homes, all privately owned, just sitting there abandoned because they're too much work to maintain. Next slide. And here you can see this is an excellent view of the town of Ouarzazate. And for those of you that can't look at that name and think, oh, how am I ever going to remember that? This is a very important city, and it's pronounced like, what is that? Ouarzazate. Why is Ouarzazate so famous? You are looking right now at the Kasbah at the very top. Ouarzazate, right at the very top, this is where we will do a hike, an amazing hike, or I highly recommend you do this hike. And it's such an influential city because, next slide, it is actually the home of Aussie like Hollywood, all the movies. Leila, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so there are so many films that are they are shooting it in Middle East or in North Africa, like Lawrence of Arabia. I would say The Gladiator, The Mummy, the salmon fishing in the Yemen were shot in this area, and there is the studio that you can actually get in and see all these beautiful places. And if you, for example, take a look at that scene that Russell Crowe is taking his first challenge and comparing it to the space, you will see that how they've actually transformed that space, but obviously with some of the other visual tools that they have to change it into that movie. But that's one of the other places, as well as actually Game of Thrones had few scenes that they use this area to shoot it. So it's actually very popular in terms of shooting movies in that area.
And just before we continue, the reason it's so popular is because of insurance. These actors, you've got the Ten Commandments was filmed. It's got the perfect backdrop because you've got the high Atlas Mountains, and so you get the mountain scenes in the backdrop. From the Kasbah that we showed you earlier, you're able to see that old biblical time setting. Things like Jewel of the Nile, the French, it's called the Salt River that runs. It's dry some parts of the year, but it runs right through the city of Ouarzazate. It's insurance purposes, our movie actors and the Hollywood unions, they're very safe going into Morocco. So they would have a movie filmed in Morocco and they will say it takes place in Baghdad. And if you're watching any of these films, just wait till the very end and you'll see that the credentials are going into Morocco. So very interesting. And now I want to just tell you a little bit about the high Atlas Mountains. Who would think, especially for those people on this call, if you're still there from BC, you are going through these snow-capped peaks en route to the glittering city of Marrakesh. And to me, I had no idea how great this drive was. I just enjoyed it so much. You're able to hike. You actually go through the town of Valley of the Roses, which is where all the most important part of Morocco, where the unique climate is where roses grow in abundance and where rose products are sold, the natural rose products from all over the world. And of course, we didn't even talk about the shopping opportunities and the argan oil and all that, which Leila will talk about later in her Marrakesh slides. Next slide. And here's some of the hairpin turns. And there's one point in the high Atlas Mountains where it doesn't matter what time of the year you're there, you're above the snow line. It's like being at the top of Whistler. So that just blew me away, because who would think on a safari experience, one night you're in the middle of the desert, and then the very next night or a half day later, you're freezing your butt off at the top of a snow-capped peak and taking hairpin turns. So it's really, really something.
And that goes back to my earlier comment that Morocco is a country that has pretty much all those aspects of, we're going to talk a little bit about the beaches, but we've so far covered the Saharas, those unique experiences, and now something like the Switzerland or the Whistler of the world, that you can actually go skiing, and obviously has a lot of culture and history. So now we're coming towards the end of our trip to Marrakesh. So we've sort of like done a whole full circle of Morocco and coming to Marrakesh. So this is an open air square, which really is really lively, that you could have dining. There are so many other smaller shops there. There are entertainers. One of the other things that I guess I haven't seen anywhere else in the world as much as I've seen it in this square is this snake charmer. So they've got all these like snakes, and they come, and I personally I'm not a big fan, but that's something that you would see a lot in this square. We're not going to talk about everything to do in Marrakesh, because we are obviously short in time, and we wanted to talk about the highlights of those cities, and more importantly, just introducing Morocco as a country. But one of the other unique experiences that I always recommend to my clients, or if they're going on a small group tour, whatever it is to go on a walking tour of Medina and the souks. And if you're going with a good guide, they will take you to some routes that you're not really seeing that many tourists, because most of time you're going on the path that there are like tens of thousands of other people's going, and you really don't get to see a lot of those places actually in person, because it's so crowded. I also wanted to talk about Marrakesh Museum, and Linda, I'll let you to talk about the history, but what fascinates me most about the Marrakesh Museum is so the museum itself in a former palace of I guess one of those famous people that they had in Morocco, and it's more in a riad format. So if you have no idea what a riad look like, it has all those basically rooms around with a courtyard in between, and they typically don't have window, but the light is coming from the roof, and that's sort of like how they transformed this heritage place into a museum. And so you're walking and you're getting a sense of all this heritage and culture while you're exploring this museum. So the place itself is a museum, left us alone all those pieces that they've collected in this place. Linda, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, yes, Marrakesh is just a twinkling, magical city. For those of you that are into your movies, which now we have lots of time, I would highly recommend you watch the Kate Winslet movie, Hideous Kinky. And this is when the hippie movement actually moved in the 60s, actually went to Marrakesh, and, how they lived in the culture and everything else. And this museum here, the history of how it was used as a palace, and the architecture and everything is definitely worthwhile seeing. It designed like a riad, and the light coming in from the top was very unique way back in the day. So definitely worthwhile seeing. That's all I want to talk about this now, because there's so much to cover. You're going to have to just go one day to see for yourself.
For sure. This slide talks about the spice markets that you will see pretty much in Morocco, all the places, and it's so they typically have open markets, and Moroccan cuisine is very aromatic, and it has lots of those spices blend in. And what I typically do personally is I buy a lot of those spices off of those markets, and it's one of the things that I always recommend people to go through some of those spice markets and just get a sense of how they are showcasing all of those spices in that space. This is some of the other souvenirs that you could buy. It's some of those like flat shoes that they create, and you could get it as a souvenir. And another very interesting place in Morocco is this Majorelle Garden, which is created by a French painter. And it's such a beautiful, unique space. So much architecture and this Art Deco style that goes into this. Linda, do you want to add anything for this?
Yes, this is so famous because Yves Saint Laurent has a very personal relationship in Morocco. And he actually rescued these gardens when they were going to be shut down because of the recession in Morocco. And Yves Saint Laurent said Morocco was always kind to him. And to see the different types of plants that are maintained here, I wouldn't miss this for anything. And I would also recommend visiting the Yves Saint Laurent Museum afterwards. They're definitely must-sees because of his collection of clothes and how many of his world designer clothings have the Moroccan influence.
If I'm not mistaken, he spent his last probably 40 years or so in Morocco. So he spent quite a
Yes,
lot of time there.
that's
And
correct.
Linda,
Well,
I'll let you to speak to this.
Well, Morocco is known for its delicious food. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm all about sustainable tourism. And we work with a company called Lotus Chef with Layla. And Lotus Chef employs women who are for some reason compromised. Like in Morocco, it's still not where we want to be with women. They if they are divorced or compromised in any way, their future is not as open as it is in other parts of the world. But we actually hire these ladies to become wonderful chefs and little angels, and we take you on a food experience where they show you everything you need to know. It's like a 4-hour experience. You learn the tea ceremony, you learn how food is prepared, you learn about the bread. Everybody would have their own kitchen. They're going to make their own food. We actually take you to where the breads are taken to local bakeries every morning, where they're put right in the stone ovens. And it's really a highlight of the trip in Marrakesh for everyone to see. And actually, you get to eat the food that you make. So there's a picture. Oh yes, in the top left-hand picture, you can see that perfect rose, and you see my name right there. Well, I was trying to make that rose out of a tomato. See, my name's there, so I can take credit for it. And my rose actually looked like I don't know, something you sat on. And I felt these little hands come from behind me and just kind of take a paring knife and go shh and carve that little rose for me. And this is the food that we made. It was so heartwarming. There was almost tears in our eyes. Next slide. I wanted to talk, or let Layla talk about the hammam experience and the importance of it.
So, if you've are familiar with the Turkish bath experience, this is pretty much that's what the hammam is, and that's why a lot of Moroccans they go to hammams just for a relaxation, scrub, and in some places even like they connect and they grab tea afterwards. So it's sort of like as a reconnecting and with themselves and just to talk about different things. And and it's sort of like those like spa experiences that now I guess a lot of us we do that occasionally, but you could see a lot of those hammams fairly frequently in a lot. But Linda, I want you to specifically talk about this significant hammam that we've here.
Well, I'm not going to talk long because I'm looking at the time, but
Yeah.
there are many different types of hammams, and just to experience it, this is one of the oldest and really good hammams if you want to go to. But a lot of the hotels that you stay at have their own hammams. I just recommend you try one. You will not be disappointed. Next slide. The other thing I want to mention about purpose-driven travel, if you go with Layla and with Tour Ken on any of our tours, whether they're customized for 2 or for 20, we always recommend visiting one of the orphanages that we support. It's a heartwarming experience, and our company donates $1 for every dollar our guests donate, and we could bring the supplies in person, give them directly to the children if you wish or wish not. It's heartwarming to see the difference our small groups can make in the lifestyle of these orphanages. What is very interesting, and I want to share, I know we're out of time, but most of the orphans are boys. Now you think, why? In a country where women are so, many countries where women are so compromised, why are all the boys orphans? And the reality is, they believe in Morocco, a boy is a boy a boy is your son till he finds a wife. A daughter is your daughter the rest of her life. So they are always afraid to adopt boys because they're afraid they'll turn on them later in life. So these boys, it's so important that we help them to get the proper education they need so they're not compromised in life. So that's an important fact. And then the other thing I just want to mention, and when from Marrakesh, it's about a 3-hour drive back to Casablanca. We recommend that you drive and don't fly, because if you fly, it's only 40 minutes, but the baggage requirements are not are domestic flights, and you'll be taking an international flight, so you might find you're paying excess baggage, and it's a big hassle for a 4-hour drive. That's quite pleasant to have to get to the airport 2 hours early, have your bags checked in, have to pay excess baggage to get back to Casablanca. And in Casablanca, there is a cafe called Rick's Cafe, which is from the old Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman movie, where we take our guests for dinner. Is the restaurant authentic? Absolutely not. But is it worth dining at? Yes. It is a tourist restaurant that was designed for tourists in honor of the movie Casablanca, in which there was never a Rick's Cafe, but a lot of the dialogue took place there. And they so happen to have good food, and we recommend at least 6 months in advance to get reservations. And also, if you do go with Layla, and we do recommend leaving and coming from Casablanca only because the airfares are cheaper. A lot of companies will have you fly into Casablanca and leave from Marrakesh. You'll find your airfare is more expensive, and it's not as comfortable. So that kind of is Morocco in a nutshell. I'm going to pass it over to Layla, and we'll be finishing in about 3.5 minutes.
So we talked about this whole circle, but if you have extra time, and this is something that I will highly, highly recommend, if you can spend and allocate more time, go to those area here in this side, which is outside of Marrakesh, on a day trip, or just to experience those beaches that we talked about. So I've added few slide here. So Essaouira is a coastal, beautiful beach. It's not as busy as Marrakesh is, and there are so many beautiful beaches that you could actually go and enjoy. Or even Agadir is nearby, beautiful beaches that you could go. And one of my favorite things, and not too many people actually talk about this, is Lexura Beach. So this is one of those, I would say, insider tips that if you're going to Marrakesh and you can maybe spare few hours or or maybe a day, this would be a great way. And as you can see, those arches, and I specifically picked this picture to show you how small humans are compared to those large arches in those beautiful beaches. So I know that we are running out of time, and we've covered fairly much, I would say, the main attractions or the itinerary of Morocco itself. But I wanted to take maybe 1 or 2 minutes and talk about Tangier here on the north part of Morocco, and the fact that it's a gateway to Spain. So an alternative way that you could explore Morocco, and you have extra time, would be to perhaps mix south of Spain, which has all these Andalusian experiences and culture, Sevilla, Cordoba, Gibraltar, all the way, and take a ferry or I could sometimes I create those small group tours for people who wanted to go to south of Spain and Morocco. So you get your gateway to Morocco. Typically, if you're doing that, would be through Tangier and Chefchaouen, and going all the way in back circle from that. I also wanted to talk about few don'ts. I'm just going to briefly go through those. So, as I mentioned before, don't expect to visit mosques, because those are strictly for Muslims, except Hassan II Mosque in Morocco. And the other cultural thing to be aware of on Fridays, because typically on Fridays they have a holy day. It's sort of like our Sunday, and the fact that a lot of stores, a lot of places are closed, or they've got shorter hours on Sundays. The same thing on Fridays, and typically they have a Friday prayers together in Morocco, and the other thing, that if you haven't traveled to North Africa or Middle East, you will get this loud noise, which they're calling for prayers, and they want people to go to the mosque. So I always recommend all of my clients to be very, very respectful during when there is a call for prayers, because that's very spiritual time for practicing Muslims. And the typically I talk about, customs may take longer. Don't think that although as Canadians we don't require visa, we pass typically through like Europe a lot much faster. It takes a little bit longer in Morocco to get out of the customs. They are absolutely against drones. So if they see any kind of a something that in your suitcase that there may be a show, any kind of indication of you may be carrying drones, they will go crazy. Um, Bargaining is something that I would absolutely encourage. So if you're going to a market, if they're make sure that typically they would say like at least half 50% off, or bring the price down, and just be prepared, because that's the culture of bargain. And Morocco is also same as so many other countries, that you wanted to make sure that you have with your taxi driver, you've made sure that you're on the same page in terms of how much is going to cost you. You've done your bargaining, because otherwise you'll be very much ripped off. And credit card may not be a choice. A lot of times you need to have cash. And I highly encourage my clients to have smaller bills, because most of the times they don't have, they may not have change to give back to you, or, intentionally, or maybe not, but make sure that you've got smaller bills, and tap water is not okay. I highly recommend that you drink not tap water. And tipping is something that is absolutely okay, and a lot of people do. Another thing that you may notice in Morocco is a lot of local people, they may not be okay with you taking a picture. So taking a picture in souks, or in some other places, it may not be as easy that you think, because they don't want you to either take a picture of their store, or they don't want to they don't want you to take a picture of themselves, their kids, their wives. So just be very prepared in terms of respecting and asking before you take a picture. If you're a vegetarian, Morocco would be a fantastic place for you. There are so many different types of tagines that they put together with couscous, with all the other vegetables that they put together, and it's no worries. It's good. Um, Solo travelers. I have to admit that a lot of times female solo travelers are not going through the same experience as male solo travelers are. And still, I think if you're a female solo traveler, you need to be super careful. There are, women only travels, for example, something that Linda does, or other companies that they do focus on solo travelers. So I highly recommend, if you're a female solo travel, consider and look into perhaps going with a smaller group tour, and dress conservatively, because a lot of times it's not okay to wear a very short short in Morocco and walk in the souks. So the last slide, um, Linda and I wanted to share about the tour that I'm organizing with Linda, which is November 14th to the 23rd. And it's a 9 nights, 10 days, the one that we talked about, the popular one. But if you have other ideas in terms of if you want that to be customized, if you're not really into a short group tour, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and build something that is a right fit for you, and fully customize it based on your need. Also, Linda and I are offering $100 off of this tour, and we'll be sending out a note to all the participants and all the people that registered, in terms of the exact pricing and what includes, and all the information about the tour.
And also, Leila, if I could just mention
Sure.
something, the dates on that slide are incorrect. It's actually the 20th to the 29th. We have moved the dates up a week because the guide that we want, who is the best in Morocco, believe it or not, in spite of COVID and everything, he's already booked. So it would be from the just a week later, the 20th to the 29th.
Thank you, Linda, for making that correction. And lastly, I'm running a contest alert for $100 travel credit towards future travel. I know it's not a right time, but we are going to get out of this situation so soon. So if you want to share a photo of your favorite trip and tell us why you loved it, and just hashtag my travel design and tag travel design by Layla, you may win. So Linda is also offering another $100. So we are doing $200 travel credit towards future travel. And that is fantastic. Honestly, I think this is truly the best time that I'm looking into booking travel for myself, and supporting smaller businesses and supporting travel businesses. And everything, there's so many great promotions at this time. So I highly encourage all of you to take advantage of that. And lastly, my next virtual travel series will be around Africa. The date is yet to be confirmed, but so I'm thinking either Friday, but probably Saturday, most probably. And I'll share all of that, the dates and the details to your email, because I do have your emails. So without any further ado, I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to open up for questions. So if you want to unmute yourself, ask your questions, feel free to do so. Or if you want to type in your question in the chat box, Linda and I will be happy to take those questions. Wow, no questions? That's amazing.
You might not have questions till things change, but at least you know where Layla is and how to reach her. Ah, one of the girls that was on your talk was one of the ladies that was on my last tour, and she just said it was an amazing tour. Thank you, Wanda. We loved having you with us. So
Okay, so one question that we have here is, I would like to travel in January. Please send tour info. Sharon, I would say that we probably should have mentioned that in the tour, but I would say the best time to travel would be a shoulder season, so that the weather is pleasant but not cold. I would say January. It's a little bit of on a colder season, a colder month for Morocco. Not like minus 35 that we get here, but if you are going to travel in early spring, March, April, or September through November, I would recommend if you could make travel arrangements during that time. But I will certainly share that information with you.
and also for in January though, the average temperature is 13 degrees. So for sightseeing, it's not bad. It does go down to 7, so it's still sunny. It just has a bit more rain in January and February, but still a good time. That's the thing about Morocco. It's not like you're going to get. It's not going to be like July or August. But I agree with Layla. There are better times, but if it's a time that works for you, those are the temperatures that you can expect.
The other thing when it comes to Morocco is in desert area, the during at night it's really cold. Um, it's something that you probably wanted to be mindful of. But I will certainly share that detail with you, Sharon. Okay, great. Any other questions? So I enjoyed a lot, Linda. I think you and I had a great time, and I was just drinking my wine. So
Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed presenting to all of you, and thrilled to hear that Wanda was on the presentation after being a world traveler herself, in Morocco. And Leila, when you mentioned Africa, are you talking Kenya, Tanzania, or are you going to get back? We'll
I'm thinking South Africa at this point, but East Africa for sure as well. So I'm separating out South Africa versus East Africa.
Excellent choices.
Excellent. All right. So thank you all for joining us. As I said, I absolutely enjoyed tonight and talking about Morocco with you and sharing about our experiences. As I mentioned, I'm happy to talk to you after this if you have other travel plans, if you're thinking about Morocco or Peru. DM me, let me know. Linda and I are here to help you out. And thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
Thank you, everyone. Be
Thank
safe,
you all.
stay healthy.
Stay
Goodbye
safe.
until later.
Take care.